Kia ora koutou, everybody. Ko Mark Bullians Takaunga. Good morning, everyone. My name's Mark Bullians, and thanks to KVH for the opportunity to talk today. This morning I'll be talking about future-focused innovation, and I'll launch straight into it. I know time's tight. I'll start off firstly by just going over some of the key global challenges as to why we undertake biosecurity and why it's so important. And I know Desi Ramu will go into more detail this afternoon around some of the global trends, but just to capture what we're doing initially in terms of biosecurity. Up first, we've got invasive species. So this is, why we're doing biosecurity for a starter. And you can see, in terms of a global challenge, it reflects quite nicely, or unfortunately, the economic drivers around growing economic activity. And you can see in the Dow Jones Stock Exchange there, all these incursions across the globe have been increasing almost exponentially. And moving out, or predicting out to 2050, there's potential that it could continue that way, but hopefully the grade area, it can level off, so there is opportunity to slow the arrival of invasive species. Global warming, atmospheric CO2 has been noted before, and you can see there today we're at levels that haven't been experienced for over 3 million years. So trends into the future are looking pretty gloomy. Hopefully we can turn that around, because we can already see the damage that climate change is actively having on people's livelihoods. And up top left here you can see apple orchards in Hastings. The one below is actually an apple orchard in Chile. So global challenge happening around the world, as we can see. On the right there is a comment from CEO McCain's, just noting that historically they had a bad crop once every 10 years, but over the last 10 years that bad crop's happening almost every year somewhere around the world. In terms of climate change changes to the actual pests and disease that we see, the graph in the middle just shows how raising temperatures can increase the risk of infection risk. So that example there is a Ceratocystis. Another key driver, I think, that is a risk for industries and native estates around the world is biodiversity loss. Unfortunately, there's a global trend right around the world around just resilience. We're losing biodiversity. So, example on the left there, you can see a range of potatoes, which its native zone of evolution is in South America. So in ancient times with Inca, they actually grew multiple varieties of potato to minimise their risk in terms of loss to high altitude temperature extremes as well as disease. And we're also pretty ahead of their time. You can see on the bottom left there, they had terraced gardens in the valley to minimise temperature extremes, and also probably enable better management and water reticulation. So those are the three that I've sort of covered off initially. Desi you got some more than that, Desi? We might go over that in more detail later. But on the plus size, you can see here, this graph just shows the exponential rate of patents. So technology is potentially going to provide some answers. And again, looking back at historical examples, we've always used technology and machinery to reduce the workload, to help understand our environment and how we interact with it. And so you can see a plough there in Egyptian times. And bottom left there is a Babylonian map of the world as it was back then, just around Iran and Iraq, as we know it today. And then as we've come through the industrial age and managed to get a better handle on how science has helped us develop new tools, our vision and understanding of the environment extends out to the universe, or universes as we know, through the Webb telescope. and also nanotechnologies right down to the microscopic. So in terms of my talk today around new innovations into the future, on the right there, I've just got a list of areas where, cutting edge active areas of science is enabling us to increase our inquiry further. Artificial intelligence will be key going into the future, big data and analytics, genetic engineering, maybe not so much with kiwi fruit, vertical farming, but certainly precision agriculture, sensors, molecular diagnostics, robotics and automation, plant microbe interactions, and I've got back to the future there as well, just a nod towards indigenous populations and how they interacted, or still do interact with their environments, probably more with a sustainable view on lifting or elevating the way they work within those limited or finite resources. Then on the left here, we've got the research areas, which I've broken down into different themes, and that largely reflects how, from my experience, how we've split the different areas of the biosecurity research areas, and it's largely reflected again in the better water biosecurity area, which Desi might cover. But in terms of mapping across to the new innovations, I think they will map quite nicely across to risk assessment, pathway management, border treatments, and the others, as you can see there. One area which we've probably devoted quite a lot of activity around the actual pest and pathogen, but there probably is future opportunity to dig deeper within looking at the susceptible hosts and in favourable environments, which I'll go over. So looking at the pest and pathogen current activities, you can see a list of different areas of research that are actively being undertaken, and they cover those different areas of research themes. And when you're looking at bang for buck, certainly pathway and treatments or preventing pests establishing is your first area or port of call to actually stop the beasties arriving. So in terms of cost benefit, that's where you'll get your greatest bang for buck. If they do arrive, new technologies might be able to knock it back, but getting that, once they're established, getting that eradication does get more and more difficult, as John mentioned earlier. I've included just this cycle down here around all the discussion around new technologies that might be useful for us going forward, but just a note not to lose sight of the basic science in terms of pests and diseases. Key is, first you need to diagnose it, then you need to generally understand what's its life cycle, how it interacts with different hosts, and then you can start looking at some of these fancy areas of research going forward. And what might those be? I mentioned before, just in the previous slide, a whole list of them, but just looking at how they might map across, and I think a lot of them we might end up speeding up our understanding of different areas. So, for example, simulating different chemicals, you might have a family of chemicals, or so rather than doing actual experiments themselves, you might be running those family of chemicals through simulations and then getting to an answer sooner. With regards to databases, you might have global databases which are connected rather than a national database or collections. So then you're getting to a taxonomic identification very fast. Getting down to the level of turning genes on and off potentially, whether that's through effectors or even, dare I say, gene editing. There's probably a conversation, and I've got another slide on that going forward. And then digital twins, so artificial intelligence and modelling again. So the example there being Team New Zealand, when they defended the America's Cup, they trained a robot basically to sail their boat, and they were able to train that robot up so that do repeated simulations multiple times. So within a short period of time, that robot was able to sail that boat faster than Burke and Turing, and actually it was ended up that the robot was able. The robot was able to teach Burke and Turing new moves in terms of that defence of that World Cup, America's Cup, sorry. So looking at the hosts, bringing that to the discussion more rather than just having that focus on the pest and disease, and the note before about losing biodiversity. There probably is further discussion around building biosecurity resilience in our crops as they're developed right from the start. And this graph just shows the evolution of our breeding technologies. We've got a timeline of 5 to 30 years for these early selective breeding technologies earlier on, which have been undertaken for thousands of years. Going forward, there probably will be a pressure to develop new cultivars earlier and to not only be resilient against some of these global pressures, but also to maintain our competitive advantage. So just a note there, probably how we have that conversation around new technologies going forward would be good to carry that through. Then when we look at the environment and bringing that more into the discussion, I've broken this up into two pieces. One is the human element around environment, and just a note there, this graph on the right, you can see in terms of regional trade agreements, the incorporation of environmental sustainability expectations is increasing more and more. So not only that is we're going to be losing our chemistries in terms of some of the hard chemistries for controlling pests and diseases on the crop. So how we keep continuing to manage the crop with friendly control methods going forward. The bottom left, you can see there is a Taiwan note for seizure of kiwi fruit and apples from the US into Taiwan and blueberries into Chile. And just another note on that, and it probably links into some of the earlier discussion you might have had yesterday around tracing. Biosecurity is normally thought of about defensively stuff coming into the country, but going forward I think it'll be a little bit more holistic in that the data that we have around what's been collected on farm will be useful for tracing and area freedoms. So if we have national surveillance, every single sample is helpful in terms of proving your area freedom for having absence of pests and diseases. And as new technologies arrive for collection of data, big data and analytics will play a key part probably in terms of helping identify if there happens to be an incursion, how we can target tracing to minimise its activity or minimise its establishment and hopefully eradication. From an environmental perspective and from the earlier point from going back to the future, and I've been lucky enough to be involved with curry dieback and myrtle rust responses over the last 7 years or more, and just learning from mana whenua and how they interact with the environment. I think there's lots of learnings from Indigenous populations around sustainability, and this example here is pretty novel to me at least. Ko ao te awa, ko te awa, ko ao. I am the river and the river is me. So I guess my interpretation of that is how Maori elevate the environment to be part of their whakapapa. So everybody or every living thing is connected to them in one way or another. So when you think about that in terms of engaging with the environment, if you're introducing a new biological control agent, or if you're introducing chemicals to eradicate something, then you need to have your appropriate consultation and have people on the same page to make those decisions. So, and then on the left there, I've got a number of different concepts around how Maori engage with their environment. So manaakitanga, So caring for the environment and community, whakapapa, mentioned how all living things are related. Tohu, that's around signs or indicators. So certainly we can see those around global climate changes today. Te taio, the environment, maramataka, so having a seasonal change, how we interact seasonally and when things should be undertaken, and Māori ora, or health or well-being of the environment and communities. So future for innovation, on the right there I was searching on the internet and saw this Chilean Federation of Fruit Producers. The future of fruit growing is digital and sustainable. It probably is. I'd argue that it's just another tool. So from my perspective, I'd be advocating for end-to-end use of all tools and not losing sight of our established core ologies that we need to continue, noting that we've got limited resources and capability that we need to sustain. It will be about sustainability and a nod there towards having that holistic overview for it, so being connected. Increasing rates of change, certainly technology is going to get faster and faster. We need to be joined up internationally and nationally, and teams are likely to be, or need to be cross-disciplinary to deal with these global challenges. Need to be collaborative teams and connected, so minimising duplication, maximise leverage where we can in terms of making bang for buck, and have our strategic priorities sorted so every dollar counts. And then the note there on the bottom, if we do launch into some of these new technologies, there will be questions around how we control that, so there will need to be legislation to, if you're introducing new gene editing or some of those modification technologies, how they'll be managed, but also how markets deal with those from a kiwi fruit perspective. Then maybe that might be an area that is further down the track. So thanks everyone. Any questions?